He built an empire. He watched it burn. And the worst part, he lit the match himself. Silas Kane was not what Sarah expected. He looked like someone's grandfather, silver-haired, well-dressed, with kind eyes and a practiced smile. But inside his hidden cellar, chained in 12 years of darkness, was a man Silas had decided was better kept alive than dead. A father, a son, a secret that would finally bring the most powerful man in Montana to his knees. This channel explores the full spectrum of the human heart, the love that redeems, the pride that destroys, and the western landscapes where both collide in stories you won't soon forget. The lesson: grief without accountability becomes cruelty. Love without freedom becomes possession, and power without conscience. That always, always burns the thing it was trying to protect. Ring that bell, subscribe, and share this with someone who needs to be reminded. The most dangerous villain is always the one who believes he's the victim.
Something was pushing its way through the snow. It turned out to be a woman. Her. A figure shuffled forward, and you could tell it was a woman. The dress she wore, probably a nice black one once, was ripped to shreds and stiff with ice. Every step she took left a crimson stain on the white ground, a grim reminder of the boots she'd lost miles ago. She dropped to her knees, then her hands gave out, and finally she just laid flat on the frozen earth that seemed hungry to swallow her whole. And that's where she stayed. The wind howled like it had won a prize. About 3 miles to the east, a fella named Colton Rivers cinched his coat up tighter, his eyes scanning the vast, empty plains. He was out looking for some cattle that had gotten lost from the south pasture when the storm first hit. But what he saw instead was a dark shape in the snow, a shape his mind refused to call human until he got close enough to see the dark red hair, all frosted with ice against her pale skin. He was off his horse before he even thought about it, his instincts taking over. His boots made a crunching sound on the hard, packed snow. The woman was face down, with one arm stretched out like she was reaching for something she'd never get. Colton knelt beside her and gently turned her over. His hands had soothed plenty of hurt animals, but they'd never felt anything quite this fragile. Her face made the air catch in his throat. Her left cheek was a terrible painting of purple and yellow, the kind of bruises that come from days of being hit, not just a single moment. Her bottom lip was split wide open and swollen something awful, but it was her throat that made a cold, hard anger settle deep in his chest. You could see the fingerprints, clear as a name signed on a deed. Somebody had tried to choke the very life out of this woman. Her eyes fluttered open, green as a polished stone in a creek bed, and they were filled with a pure, raw terror that seemed to look right past him at some horror he couldn't imagine. She tried to say something. Her cracked lips moved, but no sound came out. Colton leaned in a little closer. Her whisper was so faint it was like a ghost of a breath against his ear. "Please, don't let him take me back." He shucked off his own heavy coat and wrapped it around her like a shield. "Ain't nobody taking you anywhere. What's your name, ma'am?" She tried to tell him, but her teeth were chattering so hard she couldn't form the words. Her whole body was shaking with these deep tremors that seemed to rattle her down to the bone. Colton knew there was no time to waste on more questions. He scooped her up into his arms. She weighed next to nothing, like the cold and the fear had just hollowed her out. He draped her over his saddle and swung up behind her, using one arm to hold her steady as he pointed his horse back towards town. The woman faded in and out of consciousness on the ride back. Sometimes she'd mumble things he couldn't quite make out. Other times she'd go stiff as a board with fright, until the low rumble of his voice and the solidness of his arm convinced her she wasn't in that nightmare anymore. Silver Ridge finally appeared through the swirling snow like a prayer being answered. Colton rode directly to Martha Keene's general store, knowing it was the one place in town with a stove that burned hot enough to pull someone back from the brink. He carried the woman inside without even bothering to knock. Martha glanced up from her ledger books. Her face, weathered by years of hard living, showed a flicker of shock. But that shock turned to action in a heartbeat. She cleared off her main counter with one big sweep of her arm, sending a flurry of papers down to the floor. "Put her right here, I'll get some blankets. Doc Hensley's just next door. Go fetch him." But Philip Hensley was already pushing through the door that connected their shops, medical bag in his hand. The old doctor had made it through 40 years of frontier doctrine by developing a kind of sixth sense for when trouble showed up. He checked the woman over with a gentle, practiced speed while Martha tucked warm quilts around her and tried to get a cup of warm broth to her lips. The woman couldn't manage to drink at first. The broth just dribbled down her chin. But Martha's patient coaxing and the body's simple, desperate need for warmth finally got her to swallow. Colton just stood by the door feeling like a forgotten hat on a hook. He watched as a little bit of color slowly seeped back into the woman's face. He watched her eyes when they opened again, darting around the room with the wary alertness of a creature that had learned the hard way that safety never lasts. "Doctor." Hensley straightened up and pulled Colton to the side. His voice got low the way a doctor's does when the news isn't good. "She's gonna live. The frostbite is minor. You got to her in time for that. But Colton, them injuries, somebody beat on her and not just once. The bruising on her ribs tells me she's got at least one cracked. There are rope burns on her wrists. She's been tied up. And those marks on her throat." The doctor took a breath. His hands, usually steady as a rock during surgery, were shaking just a little bit. "Somebody tried to kill this woman, and she's been starved. This wasn't just one bad night. This has been going on for weeks, maybe even months." Colton's hands curled into tight fists by his side. "Did she say who did it?" "She ain't said a word. She's too traumatized, I reckon. When she gets her strength back, maybe then. But Colton, there's something else I gotta show you. When I was looking through her things for some identification, I found this." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a water-damaged envelope. The ink was all smeared, but you could still make out the address. It was addressed to Colton Rivers, Silver Ridge, Montana. The return address was from St. Louis. Colton took the letter with hands that had gone completely numb. He knew that handwriting. He'd seen it a dozen times in the letters they'd sent back and forth over the last 2 months. Letters from a woman named Sarah Brennan who had answered his advertisement for a wife. Letters that had been honest about her tough situation. Letters that had made him think, despite all the hardship, that maybe something good could still happen in his own broken-down life. "She's your mail-order bride," Martha said in a soft voice. She had walked over to stand with them. "This here is Sarah Brennan." Colton looked over at the woman laying on Martha's counter, at the ugly bruises and the terror in her eyes, at the fragile look of someone who had survived what should have killed her. This was not at all how he had pictured them meeting. He had imagined a clumsy introduction at the train station, some awkward small talk on the wagon ride out to the ranch, the careful dance of two strangers trying to build a life out of nothing but need and hope. He sure hadn't pictured blood on the snow, and he hadn't pictured fingerprints bruised onto her throat. "What in God's name happened to you?" he asked, even though he knew she couldn't answer yet. The fire just crackled and popped, and the wind rattled the windows. And there, in the growing warmth of Martha's store, Sarah Brennan started her long, slow walk back from the edge of death. She slept for a solid 4 hours. When she finally woke up, the raw terror in her eyes had faded into a deep, bone-weary exhaustion. She took the cup of coffee Martha handed her and wrapped both her hands around it, holding on tight like she was afraid someone would snatch it away. Her eyes moved from one face to the next. There was Martha, who now seemed familiar after being by her side for hours. There was Doc Hensley, with his kind eyes and patient manner. And then there was Colton, standing near the door like he was waiting for a sign to either leave or stay, whatever she needed him to do. When she finally spoke, her voice was as rough as a gravel road. "Where am I?" "You're in Silver Ridge, Montana," Martha said gently. "You're safe here, child." A strange look passed over Sarah's face. It started with recognition. Then it almost looked like relief. That was followed by a sharp, painful shame. "My name is Sarah Brennan. I'm the woman Mr. Rivers sent for, the bride from his advertisement. She looked right at Colton when she said it. Her eyes locked on his with a look that felt like both a challenge and a desperate plea. I was supposed to be at the station 3 days ago. I was supposed to be in my good dress, carrying my mother's Bible. I was supposed to make a good first impression. Her voice cracked on that last part. I'm so sorry. I am so very sorry. This is not how this was supposed to be. Colton crossed the room in 3 long strides. He grabbed a chair and pulled it right up next to where she was sitting, then sat down so they were looking at each other eye to eye. Miss Brennan, I don't give a damn how you got here. I just care that you made it. Whatever happened to you between St. Louis and Silver Ridge, it was not your fault. Do you hear me? It was not your fault. Tears started to stream down her bruised cheeks. She didn't even try to brush them away. I have to tell you what happened. You need to know what you're getting yourself into, what kind of trouble I've brought to your doorstep. And with that, she told them everything. The story came out in bits and pieces at first, and then it all came pouring out like a busted dam. She had left St. Louis 6 weeks ago, running from an uncle who had gotten mean after her father passed away. This uncle, Lawrence Brennan, had taken over the family's accounting business and figured Sarah would just keep on doing the books for him without a lick of pay, without any rights, and without any freedom except for what he decided to give her. When she tried to leave, he locked her in her room. When she tried again, he beat her. The advertisement for a mail-order bride had been her one desperate chance to escape, a way to vanish where even her uncle's money and influence couldn't find her. Colton's letters had been straight with her. He was a widower with 3 kids, a small ranch, a lot of hard work, and even harder winters. But he also offered her safety, respect, and a chance to start over. On the train heading west, she had met a fella named Garrett Vaughn. He was dressed real nice, was charming, and seemed to want to help her. He bought her a cup of coffee when the train stopped in Wyoming. Just a few minutes after she drank it, the whole world started to get fuzzy and dark. She woke up in a cabin, tied to a chair. Vaughn explained it all to her in a calm, businesslike tone, saying her uncle had paid him to bring her back. $500, he'd said, dead or alive. But Vaughn had done. He looked into things and found a better prize. Colton Rivers, you own land, prime land. And the man Vaughn works for wants it bad. His name is Silas Kane. That is who Vaughn answers to. He told me Kane is the biggest landman in all of Montana. Said he has had his eyes on your ranch for a long, long time. Colton's face turned to stone. Martha covered her mouth with a trembling hand. Sarah pressed on, her voice low. Vaughn's plan was to bring me here just like he promised. He would let us get married, then he would use me to tear you down from the inside out. I was supposed to spy on you, find your weaknesses, make it simple for Kane to just walk in and take everything, and if I said no, Vaughn swore he would hurt your children. He told me all about them, just to prove he had been watching. 3 little ones, a daughter who tries to be tough, a son with a soft spot for critters, and a baby who has not found her voice yet. The way he talked about them, it was real, it was planned. A couple of days back, we pulled up to a trading post. Vaughn went in to send a wire. It was the only chance I had. I used a hairpin to pick the lock on my cuffs. Some old friend of my uncle's felt sorry for me once and taught me a few tricks. I lit out for the mountains with just what I had on my back. I could hear Vaughn hunting for me, hollering my name through the woods. One minute he sounded sweet as honey. The next he was madder than a hornet. That blizzard was my only salvation. It hid my trail and forced Vaughn to find cover. But Lord, it nearly took me too. I stumbled through that snow for 2 whole days with an empty belly, and no warm clothes, with no idea where I was headed except away. Just away from that man who wanted to turn me into a loaded gun. When she was done, the room was quiet as a tomb, with just the crackle of the fire and the moan of the wind outside. Colton got up and went to the window. He looked out at the street, buried in snow, where not a soul was stirring. When he finally spoke, his voice was heavy, and it was not a question, it was a fact. This Silas Kane, he has been after my land for 15 years. Since before my daddy passed on. Before this ranch was even mine. He turned around to look at them. My daddy and Silas, they were partners, going on 30 years back. Had a lumber mill together. Well, my father found out Silas was using that mill to hide some crooked land deals. He told Silas he was going to tell the law. Silas, he turned it all around and pinned the whole dirty business on my daddy. My father served 10 years in a cell for crimes Silas cooked up. When he got out, there was not much left of him. He was gone a year later. But right before he passed, he made me swear an oath. Colton's hands balled up into tight fists. He made me promise I would never ever let Silas Kane get his hands on our land, that I would fight him tooth and nail, that I would make him pay for what he did. I have held on to that promise for 10 long years. Every trick Silas has pulled, I have stopped him. Every lawsuit he has filed, I have fought it. He has been patient, I will give him that. And now it looks like he has decided to play a different hand. Sarah's eyes grew wide. He is using me. He tried to use you. There is a big difference. Miss Brennan, you are not a weapon. You are a survivor. And from now on, you are under my watch. If Garrett Vaughn thinks he can threaten my kids, he can sure as heck try. But he is going to have to come through me to do it. Doc Hensley cleared his throat. That is a fine thing to say, Colton, but Silas Kane has deep pockets, hired guns, and lawyers on his payroll. You are just one man with a ranch and 3 little ones to look after. What exactly is your plan to take him on? Colton looked over at Sarah. I mean, he really saw her then. Past the dark bruises and the bone-deep weariness, he saw the iron in her spine. He saw the smarts in her eyes, and how she had laid out her whole story so carefully, not missing a single piece, even with everything she had been through. This was a woman who knew her way around a ledger book, a woman who could make sense of numbers and find the truth hidden in them. I have got an ace up my sleeve Silas does not know about. I have got 10 years' worth of proof. Papers that show every crooked land deal he has made. Stories from folks he has ruined. Bank statements that do not line up with what he claims. My daddy told me where to start looking before he died. I've been gathering it all up, real quiet-like. I just need one last thing to make it all hold up in front of a judge. I need Silas Kane's private books, the ledger where he writes down what is really going on. And Miss Brennan, I reckon you are the only one who can help me get my hands on it. Sarah set her coffee cup down. Her hands were not shaking so much anymore. I know how to read a balance sheet. I can find numbers that do not add up. I can follow a trail of money no matter how tangled. That is the kind of help you are looking for, is not it? Someone who can turn his books into a rope to hang him with. That is exactly what I need. But Miss Brennan, I have got to be straight with you about something. When I put that ad in the paper for a wife, I was not just looking for a woman to marry. I was looking for someone with your talents. Someone who could help me settle the score with Silas Kane. That is the real reason I picked you out of all the others. Your letter said you handled the books for your daddy's business. I need a mind like that. The truth hung in the air between them, heavy as a wet blanket. Martha let out a little huff of disapproval. Colton Rivers, of all the backwards ways to ask for a lady's hand. But Sarah was not paying Martha any mind. She was looking straight at Colton, and there was a flicker of respect in her eyes. So you are saying you picked me out on purpose? That you were using me? I needed your help. There is a difference. But you are right. That advertisement was not the whole story. And if you decide to help, I want you to go in with your eyes wide open. I am not asking you to be my wife. I am asking you to be my partner in taking down the man who ruined my father and is fixing to ruin me and my family. Now, if you say no, I will pay your way to wherever you want to go, no strings attached. But if you stay, and if we win this thing, I can give you a safe place to land, a home. And maybe, just maybe, if we are both of a mind to, we can figure out if there is something real here. Not a deal, but a choice. Sarah got to her feet. Her legs were still a bit shaky, but her eyes were steady as a rock. She walked right over to Colton and stuck out her hand. I am done with running, Mr. Rivers. I am done being somebody's pawn. If you're giving me a chance to stand up and fight, to finally stop the kind of men who have run my whole life, then I am in. Partners. They shook on it. His hand was warm and strong. Hers was steady. even though she was shaking inside. They held on just a second too long, and in that quiet moment, something passed between them that neither one of them had a name for yet. Martha dabbed at her eyes. Well, I will be. That is the dangdest proposal I ever did see, but I reckon it will work. Just then the store door flew open with a bang. Thomas Rivers, all of 9 years old and buzzing like a bee in a jar, came barreling in. His cheeks were red from the cold and he was about to bust with excitement. "Papa, there is a fella at the ranch. He is talking about some business deal, and he gave Emma a whole shiny silver dollar just for opening the door." Colton's face went as cold and hard as a frozen river. "What does he look like, son?" "He's got fancy clothes on and a real big white smile. And there's a scar on his hand, looks just like a fish hook." The last bit of color drained from Sarah's face. "That is Garrett Vaughn. He is at your house, with your children." Before she even finished the sentence, Colton was already moving. He snatched his rifle from the corner and was out that door in 3 long steps. Doc Hensley was hot on his heels, pulling his own pistol from a medical bag he kept for troubles that medicine could not fix. Sarah tried to go after them, but her legs gave way. Martha was right there to steady her. "Easy now, child. You are in no shape for this. Those kids, if Vaughn lays a hand on them on my account, he will not. Colton Rivers is a lot of things, but he has never once failed to protect his own." The wind had settled and the snow was coming down soft and thick. Colton spurred his horse on, riding hard for his ranch. Thomas held on tight behind him while Doc Hensley kept up on his own horse. Those 5 long miles from town to his homestead had never seemed so far. Each second felt like an hour. Every picture that flashed in his mind was worse than the one before. He saw Emma and Lily, all alone with the man who had beaten Sarah so bad she ran out into a blizzard that could kill a person. He saw Emma with that stubborn streak and a heart fierce as a mother bear. And he saw Lily with her quiet ways and those eyes that saw everything. The ranch finally came into view through the curtain of snow. Smoke was curling up from the chimney. The warm glow of a lamp shined in the windows. It all looked peaceful, just like any other night. But that did not mean a thing. Trouble has a way of wearing a friendly face right up until it is too late. A horse was tied to the porch railing. It had an expensive saddle and looked well fed. The kind of horse a man with deep pockets would ride. Colton swung down and passed Thomas to Doc Hensley. "Take him around to the back. Get him in through the kitchen and keep him with the girls. If you hear gunfire, you get them out of there and you run. Do not look back for me." Doc just gave him one solid nod. There was no room for argument. Now was not the time. Colton walked up to his own front door. He did not rush. He did not reach for his gun. He opened it and walked into a scene of awful calm. Garrett Vaughn was sitting in Colton's own chair by Colton's fire, drinking coffee from one of Colton's mugs. Emma was standing by the window, her arms folded tight, her face wearing a look far too old for a 12-year-old. Lily sat on the floor holding her rag doll, just watching Vaughn with the quiet stillness of a rabbit, trying to figure out if it is looking at a fox. Vaughn glanced up, a practiced professional smile on his face. It was the smile of a man who sold things for a living and did not care one bit if those things were plots of land or people's lives. "Mr. Rivers, you are finally here. I was starting to think you had forgotten our meeting." Colton shut the door gently behind him. "You and I do not have a meeting, and you are in my home without an invitation. Out here in Montana, we call that trespassing. Is that so? What a shame. I was hoping we could talk about a business deal. My employer, Silas Kane, is mighty interested in buying this property of yours. He has given me the authority to offer you $10,000. That is well over what it is worth, I can promise you that. I am not interested. I reckon you should think about it again. This land has to be a heavy weight on your shoulders. A widower with 3 children to look after, always struggling to put food on the table. $10,000 could set you up with a comfortable life somewhere a little easier, somewhere safer for these pretty children." The threat was subtle, wrapped up in a package of false concern, but it was a threat all the same. Emma's hand twitched toward the fireplace poker. Colton met her gaze and gave a single tiny shake of his head. She stopped cold. "Mr. Vaughn, I know exactly who you are. I know you work for Silas Kane. I know you snatched Sarah Brennan off a train and beat her, and I know you told her you would kill my children if she did not do what you said." Vaughn's smile never wavered, but a chill crept into his eyes. "That is a mighty serious thing to say. Do you have any proof?" "I have her word. She is in town right this minute, safe with Doc Hensley and Martha Keene. She will be telling her story to the territorial marshal just as soon as the telegraph lines are working again. Ah, the runaway bride. Yes, I did run into Miss Brennan on the train. A troubled young lady. Her uncle, Lewis, is terribly worried. He is even offering a reward for her safe return. $500, I do believe. It is all legal. I can even show you the paperwork, I am sure you could, and I am sure it is a very convincing, well-paid-for lie. Vaughn set his coffee mug down. The friendly mask was beginning to crack. "Mr. Rivers, let me be plain with you. Silas Kane wants this land. He's going to have this land. The only thing left to decide is whether you walk away from it with money in your hand, or if you are carried off it in a pine box. You are just one man. Silas has 20. You have 3 children to look after. You need to think about what is best for them." Colton took one step, then another, until he was standing right over Vaughn's chair. He looked down at the man who had beaten a woman half to death and threatened to murder his children. "Here is what I think is best for my children. I think it is best they learn that bad men do not get to win just because they have got more money and more guns. I think it is best they see their father stand his ground against a bully instead of backing down. And I think it is best you get yourself out of my house before I forget that I am trying to act civilized." Vaughn got to his feet. They were about the same height, about the same age. But one of them had spent 15 years battling Montana winters, stubborn cattle, and the memory of a good man who was destroyed by a crooked deal. The other had spent those years bullying folks who could not defend themselves. You could see it on them. "You are making a mistake," Vaughn said. "Well then, it is my mistake to make. Get out. Silas is not going to give up. He never does, neither do I. You go tell your boss that Colton Rivers said he's welcome to come and try to take this land. But he had better bring a whole army with him because I will be waiting." Vaughn walked to the door and stopped, his hand on the knob. "Sarah Brennan is going to be the reason you and your family end up dead. When it happens, do not say I did not warn you." He was gone. The sound of his horse's hooves faded into the quiet, snow-filled air. The room was heavy with silence. Emma was the first to speak. "Pa? Who was that man really? A bad man who works for another bad man? But they are not going to win, Em. Not if we are smart, and we are brave, and we are careful. What if we are not smart enough? What if they are stronger than us?" Colton knelt down in front of his daughter and took her hands. "Then we find some help and we fight anyway, because some things are worth fighting for. This ranch, this family, and the truth about what they did to your grandpa. Those things are more important than just being safe." Lily came over to stand with them. She tugged on Colton's sleeve and held out her rag doll. Then, with careful movements, she signed the doll's name. It was Hope. "That is right, sweetheart. Hope. We are going to hold on to that." Doc Hensley and Thomas came in through the kitchen door. Thomas was bursting with questions about the mean man and why his pa had been so mad and if there was going to be a real fight. Doc quieted him with a steady look and a hand on his shoulder. "Colton, we need to figure out what to do next. Vaughn knows Sarah is alive and that she is talking. He will ride straight back to Kane. They are going to come back harder. I know it. That is why we are going to make the first move. Doc, can you get a telegram out to the Territorial Marshal's office in Helena? Tell them we need help with a land fraud case. Tell them we have got evidence. I can try, but Colton, Kane has friends. Powerful friends in the government. The marshal might not show up, or he might not get here in time. Then we will buy ourselves some time. Sarah mentioned that Kane keeps his own private ledger. That is what we have to get. The real book, with every crooked deal he has ever made written down. With that book, we will have the proof we need to stand up to Kane's fancy lawyers and the judges he has in his pocket. How in the world are you going to get that? Colton looked back toward town, toward the general store where Sarah was safe and warm. Sarah, who had lived through 6 weeks of pure hell and walked through a blizzard just so she would not be used as a weapon against his family. Sarah, who was braver and smarter than any of them, and who deserved a whole lot better than being a pawn in some fight between two stubborn men. I'm going to ask for help, real help. No more tricks, no more using people. Just an honest question between two partners. He rode back into town through a snow that felt like it was washing everything clean. The air was getting colder. Another storm was brewing up on the horizon. But inside Martha's store there was warmth and light, and a woman who had decided to stand and fight instead of turning to run and hide. Sarah was sitting by the stove, wrapped up in quilts and sipping on some broth. She looked up the moment Colton came in. Her eyes asked the question her mouth did not have to. The children are safe. Vaughn is gone, at least for now. You could see the relief wash over her. It was followed by a look of pure resolve. What do we do now? That is up to you. I have to get my hands on Silas Kane's ledger, the one that holds all his real business records. Sarah, you are the only one who has been inside, who could know which papers are the real deal and which ones are just for show. But getting onto Kane's property is going to be dangerous. I will not ask you to put yourself in that kind of danger, not after all you have been through. Sarah put down her bowl of broth. She stood up. Her legs were stronger now. Her back was straight even though she was worn clean out. Mr. Rivers, Colton. I spent 6 weeks as Garrett Vaughn's prisoner. I walked for 2 days through the mountains in a blizzard. I survived an uncle who used his fists on me and a cousin who tried to have me locked away in an asylum just to get my inheritance. I am done being somebody's victim. She walked over to him. If you are going after Silas Kane's records, then I am going with you. Not as your wife and not as someone you hired, as your partner, as someone who has just as much right to see justice done as you do. It could get you killed. Living scared is just another way of being dead. I choose this way. Colton looked at her, and he really saw her. He looked past the bruises that were already starting to heal, past the weariness and the hurt, and he saw the steel that was underneath it all. This was a woman who had kept her mind sharp through a kidnapping, gave out on her. This was a woman who had known torment, who had slipped her chains and run into a blizzard, and lived to tell the tale. She was not the kind to fold. All right then. Partners, he said, turning to her. But Sarah, you need to know one thing. My kids, they have buried one mother already. If we take on Kane, there is a real good chance we will both end up in the ground. I need to be sure you know what you are signing up for. I know the risk, she said. But do you understand that those kids of yours need to see grown-ups stand up for what is right? That the only real way to keep them safe is to put a stop to the man who is after them for good? I do. They stood there close in the warm light of the lamp. Outside, the wind howled and the storm was gearing up for another round. Inside, something else was brewing between them. It was not love, not yet. It was something tougher. It was two folks who had been beaten down by the world looking at each other and seeing someone else who refused to stay down. Martha watched them from behind her counter and could not help but smile, even with the worry churning in her gut. 2 people had stumbled into her store that day. One was half frozen and running for her life. The other was a man willing to help a stranger. Now they were becoming a team. A team that, with a little luck and a whole lot of grit, might just be impossible to stop. The snow kept falling, and the wind kept blowing. And in that small circle of light, a deal was struck that was either going to save this town or burn it down. There was no in-between. There never is. The next morning, Colton came to get Sarah and take her to the ranch. The sun came up cold and bright over Montana, the kind of light that made the fresh snow glitter like a field of diamonds. Shone like diamonds and hurt your eyes to look at straight on. Martha had come along to be a proper chaperone, because some things still had to be done right, even with trouble brewing. They all rode in Colton's wagon. Sarah was bundled up in blankets he had lent her, while Martha filled the heavy quiet with town gossip. When they crested the last hill, the ranch came into view. It was a simple place, but cared for. The barn could use some new shingles, but it was sturdy, and the house had a welcoming curl of smoke coming from the chimney. The fences were straight and strong, the kind a man builds when he believes in a job well done, even if no one is around to see it. Sarah took it all in. She had learned a long time ago to see past how things look to how they really are. This place was real. A hard-working, honest-to-goodness ranch. 3 little figures were waiting on the porch, just watching. Emma stood right at the front with her arms crossed tight. She looked like she was ready to defend her home from an army. She was 12 years old, but acted like she was 40, with dark hair pulled back so tight it looked stern. Her eyes saw everything and did not seem to forgive much. She had been the mama to her brother and sister since their own had passed. That was not a job she was about to give up. Thomas, her little brother, was just hopping on his feet next to her, a ball of 9-year-old energy. He had a curious, open face, a boy who had not yet figured out the world could be a dangerous place. And then there was Lily, 7 years old and quiet as a field mouse. She clutched a rag doll to her chest, and her eyes, watching that wagon come closer, seemed way too old for her little face. Colton hopped down and helped Sarah to the ground. Her legs felt a little stronger today, but they were still a bit shaky, wobbly. All 3 children watched her every single move. "Emma, Thomas, Lily," Colton said. His voice was steady and careful, like a man walking a tightrope. "This here is Miss Sarah Brennan. She's going to be staying with us for a little while. She will be helping me out with the books." Thomas could not hold it in another second. "Is she that mail-order bride? Are you going to marry her? Are we going to get more babies?" "Thomas," Emma hissed at him. But Colton just answered him straight. "Miss Brennan is a friend, and she is in a bit of a bind. We are going to help her out, and she is going to help us with some important work. That is all y'all need to know for now." Emma's little jaw went tight. "Where is she sleeping?" "In the guest room, by herself." A little bit of the tightness went out of Emma's shoulders. She was not happy about it, but she was not fixin' to start a fight either. Sarah took a small step forward. She did not put on a fake smile or try to sweet-talk them. She just looked each one of them in the eye and told them the plain truth. "I know this is mighty strange. I know y'all do not know me from Adam and have no reason to trust me. I am not here to take anyone's place or to take a single thing from you. I am here because your father is a good man, helping me get away from some very bad people. And in return, I might be able to help him with something important. If having me here makes you feel uneasy, I surely do understand. But I promise you, I will do my best to stay out of your hair." Her honesty seemed to catch them off guard. Thomas was the first to bounce back. "Do you like critters? I got 3 cats, a rabbit, and 2 chickens I am teaching to do tricks." In spite of all the trouble, Sarah felt a real smile start to form. "I like animals a whole lot. Want to come meet 'em? General Carrots just learned how to hop in a circle yesterday." "Thomas," Emma said again with a sharper tone, but Sarah was already nodding her head. "I would like that very much." Thomas grabbed her hand without a second thought. With all the trust of a boy who had not learned yet that grown-ups can tell lies. He started pulling her toward the barn, talking a mile a minute about his whole crew of critters. Sarah just went along with him, keeping up with his quick steps, listening to him go on and on about what rabbits think and how to train chickens. Emma just stood there and watched them go, with a look on her face Martha could not figure out. Lily tugged on her daddy's coat. She pointed at Sarah, then at herself, and then made a few careful hand signs. Colton knelt down to her level. "You want to know if she is safe?" Lily nodded. "I think she is, sweetheart. I surely hope so." But you listen to your gut. If anything feels wrong, you tell me. You hear? You tell me, and I will take care of it." Lily thought about that for a second. Then she walked toward the barn, where you could hear Thomas's excited voice floating on the chilly air, with Sarah's quieter replies mixed in. The little girl stopped right in the doorway, just watching and making up her mind. Inside the barn, Thomas had Sarah sitting on an upside-down bucket and was showing off his animals one at a time. The cats put up with the fuss like only cats can. General Carrots, the rabbit, came over and sniffed at Sarah's boots with a twitching nose. The chickens, who he called Sergeant Pepper and Corporal Salt for reasons he could not rightly explain, were busy pecking at feed on the dirt floor. "They are supposed to salute," Thomas said with a long face. "I have been working on it for 3 weeks, but all they do is eat and make a mess." "Well," Sarah said, "maybe chickens just show their respect in a different way than soldiers." Thomas's face lit up. "You think so?" "I do. Just look at how they come running when you call them. That is trust, and I would say that is a whole lot better than a salute." The boy just beamed. Then, with the kind of directness only a child has, he asked, "Did somebody hurt you? You got bruises on your face." Sarah's hand automatically went up to her cheek. The marks were getting lighter, but you could still see them. "Yes," she said softly. "Someone did hurt me. That is why I had to leave my home and come here. Pa says we are supposed to help folks who are hurt, even when it is not easy. Your pa is a very good man." "I know. He has been awful sad, though, ever since Ma died." "Do you think you can make him not so sad?" The question hung in the air, heavy as a stone. Sarah did not know what to say. Just then, Lily appeared in the doorway. She walked right over to Sarah and, very slowly and deliberately, placed her rag doll right in Sarah's lap. Then she just stood there, waiting. Sarah knew deep down this was some kind of test. She picked up the doll with gentle hands. "What is her name?" Lily took a little slate out of her pocket and carefully wrote one word. "Hope." "Hope," Sarah whispered. "That is a beautiful name." The little girl looked at Sarah's face for a long, long time. Then she took her doll back, tucked it under her arm, and held out her other hand. Sarah took it. Lily's small fingers closed around hers, surprisingly strong. Thomas grinned. "Lily likes you. She does not like most people." "I am honored," Sarah said, and she truly meant it. The three of them walked back to the house together. Emma watched from the porch, a look on her face that was not quite hostile, but it was getting there. The days that followed settled into a quiet, steady beat. Sarah moved into the guest room, a cozy little spot with a simple bed and a window that opened up to the mountains. Her mornings were spent wrestling Colton's mess of financial papers into some kind of order. In the afternoon, she would help Martha in town, and the evenings were for sitting with the children while Colton tackled ranch chores that seemed to stretch on forever. She started to learn their ways. Emma was always up before the sun to get breakfast started, moving around the kitchen like she had been doing it her whole life. Thomas would feed his critters, talking to them just like they were folks who just did not feel like talking back. Lily would draw in her sketchbook, making pictures of the ranch and the mountains so real you could almost touch them. Sometimes she drew people, but their faces were always left empty. Little by little, Sarah found her own rhythm in the family's life. She never tried to act like their mother. Emma had that job locked down with a fierce love. Instead, Sarah became something different. She was a quiet presence, an ear to listen, someone who was just there without asking for a single thing. One evening, Emma walked in and saw Sarah mending a tear in Thomas's shirt. The girl just stood in the doorway and watched for a moment. "You do not have to do that. I can handle the mending. I know you can. I have seen your stitch work. You are mighty good at it. But I enjoy sewing. It helps me clear my head." Emma drifted closer and sat down on the other side of the table. "Mama used to sew at night. She always said it was peaceful. It surely is." They just sat there in the quiet. Sarah's needle danced through the fabric. Emma's fingers drew invisible lines on the old wooden table. "You are not like the others," Emma said, breaking the silence. "What others?" "The other women Pa brought out here. There were 2 of them before you. Neither one lasted more than a week. They said we were too much trouble, said the ranch was too hard, said Pa was too sad." Sarah did not miss a stitch. "I am not here because it is easy." "Then why are you here?" "Because I am done running. Because I want to help put a stop to bad men hurting good people. And because your father gave me plain honesty instead of a bunch of pretty lies. That means a whole lot more to me than easy." Emma thought on that for a second. Mama used to say something like that the truth was worth more than comfort. Sounds like your mother was a wise woman. She was, right up until she died. The bitterness in her voice was sharp enough to cut you. Sarah put her sewing down. "Tell me about her." "Why? So you can try to be just like her?" "No. So I know who I am not trying to replace." That answer seemed to catch Emma off guard. The girl's stiff shoulders relaxed just a little. She was brave and she was kind and she never once complained, even when things got real tough. She made everything better just by being around. And then she was gone, and nothing has been better since. I am sorry. Everybody is sorry. Being sorry does not bring her back. No, it sure does not. But Emma, can I tell you something? The girl just gave a tired nod. I lost my mama too when I was 17. And for the longest time, I was just plain mad that everyone else got to keep on living when she was gone. It felt wrong, like it was not fair, but then I realized something. She did not die just to make me angry. She died because sometimes awful things just happen. And being mad at the whole world for it was like being mad at the snow for falling. It just is. The real question is what we decide to do with the time we have left. Emma's eyes were glistening. What did you do? I kept going, and I learned all the things she was good at, so a piece of her could keep living on through me. And after a while, I learned that missing someone and being happy again are not 2 different things. You can do both at the same time. A single tear rolled down Emma's cheek. She swiped it away like it had offended her. I do not know how to do both. You will. Just give it some time. That night, Emma did not slam her bedroom door. She closed it gently. And the next morning, when Sarah came down for breakfast, a cup of coffee was sitting at her spot, made exactly the way she liked it. Emma did not say a word. She did not have to. That cup of coffee said it all. While Sarah was building trust with the children, she and Colton spent their evenings plotting how to take down Silas Kane's whole operation. The dining table became their war room. Financial papers were spread out over every inch of wood. Ledgers and receipts and property deeds were stacked up like mountains of proof that just needed to be sorted out. Sarah dug in with the kind of focus that comes from years of sorting out tangled numbers. Her fingers traced the columns. Her mind saw the patterns that Colton had overlooked. "Right here," she said one night, her finger tapping on a set of property transfers. "These signatures are fakes. Look at the capital T in the county clerk's name. It leans a different way on each paper. Someone was trying to copy Thomas Whitmore's signature, but they did not have a good, steady example to work from." Colton leaned over her shoulder to get a better look, so close she could smell the leather and wood smoke and the crisp, cold air that always seemed to follow him. "Can we prove that in a court of law?" "Maybe, but a slick lawyer could just say it was sloppy handwriting. We need the original source. We need Silas Kane's ledger. That is where he will keep the real records, the ones that spell out exactly how much he paid for those fake documents and who he paid to do it. That ledger is at his estate, about 20 miles north of here. He keeps it under lock and key in his study. Then we have to get into his study. Sarah, that place is a fortress. He has got armed men walking the grounds, and he knows I am his enemy. There is no way on earth I could get anywhere near it." She turned in her chair to face him. Their faces were just inches apart in the warm lamplight. "But he does not know me, not really. Garrett Vaughn thinks I am just some scared woman who ran away. What if I go to Silas and tell him I need protection from you? He would eat that up, turning your own bride against you. Absolutely not. It is the only way, Colton. It is too dangerous. Everything about this is dangerous. But this gives us a fighting chance. They went back and forth deep into the night. Martha, who was in the kitchen supposedly washing dishes but was actually listening to every word, finally had enough. She is right, Colton. It is the smartest hand we can play. Sarah goes over to Kane's place during the day, says she needs a safe place to hide. While Kane is busy gloating about his win, she finds that study and takes pictures of the important pages. And for when Kane figures out she is lying, that is why you will be waiting nearby with enough good men to pull her out of there if things go sideways. Colton looked at Sarah. He really looked at her. And he did not just see the woman who had stumbled into his life 3 weeks ago. He saw the partner who had risen up, strong and smart and steady as a rock. I do not like this one bit. I know. But Colton, I have been scared my whole life. I am done with it. Let me do this. Let me be brave just this once. His hand found hers on the table, his rough fingers lacing with hers. You are already the bravest person I have ever known. Their eyes locked. The moment stretched out, about to turn into something else entirely. Then Thomas's voice called down from upstairs about a bad dream, and the spell was broken. But something had changed between them. It felt like the start of something that neither one of them was quite ready to put a name to yet. 3 days later, Sarah stood in front of the mirror in her borrowed room, getting ready for the most dangerous role she would ever play. She put on her plainest dress, fixed her hair in a simple style, and made herself look as helpless and desperate as she could. She looked just like what Silas Kane would expect from a woman running from Colton Rivers. Downstairs, Colton was waiting with a wagon. Doc Hensley and 3 men he trusted from town were going to follow from a distance, ready to jump in if they were needed. Emma showed up in the doorway of Sarah's room. "Are you really going to his house? To Silas Kane's?" Sarah turned around. "Yes. Pa says it is dangerous." "It is? Then why are you doing it?" Sarah knelt down so she was looking right into the girl's eyes. "Because sometimes the only way to stop being afraid is to walk right up and face the very thing that scares you the most." Emma's jaw was set hard. "If he hurts you, I will kill him myself." The fierce, protective fire in those words made Sarah's throat feel tight. "Thank you, Emma. But that will not be necessary. I will be careful, and your father will be watching close by. You better come back. Thomas likes you, and Lily drew you in her sketchbook. She only puts folks in there she plans on keeping around. I will come back, I promise." She prayed it was a promise she could keep. The Kane estate looked like it had been dropped into the snow from another world. 3 stories of fancy stone and expensive glass. Big columns stood on either side of the entrance. It had gardens that must have cost a fortune to keep alive in the harsh Montana climate. This was the kind of money that made Colton's humble ranch look like a sharecropper's shack. Sarah walked up to the front door, her knees feeling like they might give out. She forced them to stay straight. She knocked. A servant opened the door and looked her up and down with the kind of scorn the very rich save for the desperate. "Deliveries go around back. I am not making a delivery. I need to speak with Mr. Kane. My name is Sarah Brennan. He will want to see me." The servant's face changed. He recognized the name. He left her standing on the porch in the cold while he went to check with someone inside the house. When he came back, his whole attitude had shifted. "This way, miss. Mr. Kane will see you right away." The inside of the house was just as grand as the outside had promised. Thick carpets, fancy oil paintings, and furniture that screamed of wealth so old it did not need to shout anymore. Sarah was led down hallways that felt like they were designed to make a person feel small. A man nobody paid much mind to. Silas Kane stood waiting in a library so grand it could have swallowed the little lending room in Silver Ridge 3 times over. He was a man of 60, with hair like spun silver, and a face that seemed custom-made for a fancy portrait. His eyes were sharp, though, always tallying things up, and they didn't miss a lick. "Miss Brennan," he said. "What a surprise. I was told you'd thrown in your lot with Colton Rivers." Sarah let the tears well up. It wasn't hard. Bless her heart, she'd had a lifetime of practice making waterworks appear on cue. "I was mixed up and scared," she said. "But Mr. Rivers, he isn't the man I thought he was. He's obsessed with ruining you. It's all he ever talks about. His fire and fury frightened me. I had to get away." Silas just watched her. She could feel his mind working, sorting truth from lies, trying to figure if this was real or just a dog and pony show. His man, Garrett Vaughn, spoke up. "You seemed mighty set on getting to Rivers. What changed your mind?" "I didn't know what I was walking into," she pleaded. "I thought I was going to a peaceful ranch, a chance to start fresh. Instead, I found a man just eaten up with revenge. He has papers all over the place plotting how to tear you down, how to wreck your business. I just wanted a quiet life, not to be in the middle of a war." "And so you came to me," Silas said. "I don't have anywhere else to turn. My uncle wants me back in St. Louis. Colton Rivers wants to use me like a tool against you. All I want is to be left in peace." Silas poured some brandy from a fine crystal bottle and handed her a glass. She took it but didn't take a sip. She couldn't afford to get her senses clouded, not even a little. "Come on, sit down," he said. "Tell me every last thing Colton Rivers is planning." They talked for a solid hour. Sarah fed him a careful mix of truths and well-crafted lies that were designed to go down easy. Yes, Colton had papers and documents. Yes, he was building a case against him. No, she didn't know the fine details because he flat out didn't trust her enough to share them. And yes, she reckoned he was fixing to call in the territorial marshal. Silas took it all in with the focus of a man who'd built an empire by always knowing more than the other fellow. At last he got to his feet. "You must be plumb worn out. My housekeeper will get a room ready for you. Get some rest. We'll talk more tomorrow about what's to be done with you." That last part hung in the air, a threat as quiet as it was clear. Sarah was led to a bedroom on the second floor. It was fancy and comfortable, but the door was most definitely locked from the outside after the servant left. She waited until the world outside was pitch black. Then, using a hairpin, she picked the lock, a handy skill that had saved her bacon more than once. The hallway was empty and dead quiet. She slipped through the shadows, counting doorways, trying to bring back the layout Colton had sketched for her from his memories of visiting this house as a boy with his father. The study, he'd said, was on the first floor, in the west wing, right behind the library. She went down the stairs, one slow step at a time, freezing solid when a floorboard groaned, just waiting, listening, and only moving again when the silence felt long and safe. The study door was locked. She picked this one, too. She slipped inside. The moonlight poured through the tall windows, lighting up a room built for a king. There was a huge desk, big leather chairs, and behind a painting of a woman with kind eyes, a safe was built right into the wall. Sarah went straight to it and checked the lock. It was a combination dial with 4 numbers. She started rummaging through the desk for any kind of clue. She found a ledger, but it wasn't the main one, just a record of recent dealings. There was nothing in it that would hold up in a courtroom. She tried the desk drawers, but they were locked tight. She picked those too. Inside one was a key and a note in Silas's own handwriting. Vault combination, Hannah's birthday. The blood in Sarah's veins ran cold. Hannah. That was Colton's wife who had passed away. Why in the world would Silas Kane use her birthday for his safe combination? What kind of connection could there possibly be between Silas Kane and Hannah Rivers? Before she could even begin to sort it out, she heard voices in the hall. Footsteps were getting closer. She grabbed the small ledger, shoved it down the front of her dress, and dove into a closet, pulling the door nearly shut and peeking through the crack. The study door swung open. Silas Kane walked in with Garrett Vaughn. "Are you sure we can trust her?" Garrett asked. "Of course not," Silas scoffed. "She's lying through her teeth, but we'll let her think I've bought her story. When Colton comes looking for her, and you know he will, we'll be ready for him." Sarah's heart was hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. "And the children?" Garrett asked. "Tomorrow night. Colton will be at the town meeting. He never misses the first Wednesday of the month. His kids will be home with just that old foreman. We'll grab them. Use them to bargain. Colton signs over his land, or we start sending him pieces of his daughters. A storm of fury and terror raged inside Sarah's chest. She had to bite her lip hard to keep from crying out. "When do we make our move?" Garrett asked. "Tomorrow, right at sundown. Get 6 men, and make sure they're armed. I want this done fast and quiet." They talked over the details for a few more minutes, and then they left. Sarah stayed hidden in that closet until the whole house was quiet as a tomb. Then she made her move. She had to warn Colton. She had to stop this nightmare before those poor children were put in harm's way because of her. She slipped out through a window, dropped into the snow below, and ran through the darkness toward the spot where she knew Colton would be waiting with Doc Hensley and the others. She found them about 2 miles from the main house. The horses were stomping, and the men were tense. Colton was off his saddle before she even reached them. "Sarah, did you get it? Are you hurt?" She told him the whole story, gasping for air between breaths that felt like fire in her lungs. "The plan, they're going to take the children tomorrow night. 6 armed men." Colton's face turned white as a sheet, then became as hard as West Texas caliche. "I have to get them out of there tonight. I'll take them to Martha's place in town." "No," Sarah said, grabbing his arm. "If you run, Silas wins. He'll take your land for sure when you're not there to defend it. We have to stand and fight. Not with my children's lives on the line." "Then we lay a trap," she insisted. "We let him think he's already won. And when he comes for the children, we'll be the ones waiting for him." Doc Hensley stepped up. "She's right, Colton. We get the kids somewhere safe, but we make the ranch look like it's business as usual. Then we ambush Vaughn's men when they show up. We'll force them to testify against Kane." Colton looked back and forth between them. His entire world was hanging right there in the balance. His children, his land, his father's legacy, everything he had ever fought for. "All right," he said finally. "We'll set the trap. But if one single thing goes wrong, if there is even a whisper of danger to Emma or Thomas or Lily, we pull them out of there immediately. Agreed?" "Agreed," they all said. They rode like the wind for Silver Ridge and planned all through the night. By the time the sun came up, every last detail was set in stone. Emma, Thomas, and Lily would be told the truth. They would be a part of the plan. Because Colton had learned a hard lesson, that children were a whole lot braver than most grown-ups gave them credit for, and they were even stronger. When he gathered them at the breakfast table and explained what was happening, Emma's answer came right away. "So, we're the bait. You're my brave children, helping me catch some very bad men," he said. "And I'll be there the entire time, hidden, watching over you. The second anything feels wrong, I will put a stop to it." Thomas was bouncing in his seat with excitement. "It's like a military operation. Can I have a code name?" "Thomas, this is serious." But then little Lily pulled out her slate and carefully wrote, "I trust you, Papa." Those 4 words steadied Colton more than any battle plan ever could. The next day just crawled by. Sarah couldn't eat a bite. She couldn't sit still for a minute. She went over and over the plans, making sure everyone knew exactly where they were supposed to be. She tried her best not to think about all the ways this could go terribly wrong. As the sun started to dip low, the trap was ready. Colton, Sarah, Doc, Martha, and 5 men they trusted from town were hidden in spots all around the ranch. The children were told to act normal, to go to bed when they usually did, and to trust that the grown-ups would keep them safe. Darkness fell over the land. The ranch looked quiet and empty, like an easy target. They came at 8 o'clock. 6 men on horseback, armed to the teeth and full of confidence, with Garrett Vaughn leading the charge. He clearly expected this to be a walk in the park. They broke into the house through the kitchen door and moved from room to room with their guns drawn. They found the children's bedroom. Emma, Thomas, and Lily were lying in their beds with their eyes wide open, their hearts pounding. but on the outside they looked calm. Garrett cracked a smile. "Got 'em. Let's go." Suddenly, all the lights in the house blazed to life. Colton was standing in the doorway holding a rifle, with Sarah right beside him holding his revolver. Doc and the other men blocked off every way out. "Put down your weapons," Colton's voice boomed. "You're surrounded." The air in the room was stretched tight as a banjo string. Garrett's men looked to him, waiting for a command. He was doing the math in his head, 6 against 8. But his 6 men hadn't been expecting a fight. "You think this changes anything?" Garrett sneered. "Silas Kane owns the sheriff, the judge, and half the folks in the territorial government. You can't touch us." Sarah held up the small ledger she had taken from the desk. "This book documents every bribe paid to Sheriff Morton, Judge Blackwell, and the county clerk, Whitmore. It has the names, the dates, and the amounts. That's proof of corruption." "That's nothing," Garrett spat. "Silas will burn it, and everyone in this room right along with it." Colton's rifle didn't move an inch. "Not if we get our hands on the main ledger first. Sarah, did you figure out where he keeps it?" "Yes," she said. "It's in his study behind a portrait. The safe combination is Hannah's birthday." Those words just hung there in the silent room, thick and poisonous. Colton's face went pale. "What did you just say?" "Silas's safe combination," she repeated. "The note said Hannah's birthday." "Colton, why on earth would Silas Kane know your wife's birthday, Sharretts?" He let out a laugh, sharp and bitter as a winter wind. "Well, now, this is just perfect. Silas never told you the best part, did he? Tell me what it is." Colton's voice was cold enough to chip granite. Garrett chewed on his options for a moment, then figured causing a ruckus would serve him better than keeping quiet. "Hannah Rivers was more than just your wife, Colton. She was Silas Kane's daughter, his one and only child. And you went and stole her right out from under him when you married her against his blessing." The room just about exploded. Folks were gasping, denying it. And then Emma's voice cut clean through the noise. "You are a liar. Mama never said a word about another daddy." Garrett just kept on, relentless. "Hannah's last name was Morrison, because that was the man who adopted her after her real ma and pa passed on. Thomas Morrison raised her from the time she was 15. But before all that, she was Hannah Kane, Silas's little girl. He doted on her something fierce. Then she turned 18 and lit out to get away from his tight grip. She married you, the son of the man he hated most in this world. Silas tried everything to get her back. He offered her cash money, a big fancy house, the whole works. She told him no. She said she loved you. She said she'd rather scrape by with a good man than live high on the hog with him. 2 years after that, she was gone, died in a barn fire. And Silas, well, he's put that blame squarely on your shoulders ever since." Colton looked like he had taken a punch to the gut. Sarah reached out and grabbed his arm to keep him steady. "I had no idea. She never told me a thing because she cut all her ties, changed her name, and tried to be somebody new. But you just cannot run from your bloodline, Rivers. Those 3 children of yours are Silas Kane's own grandchildren. He has been watching them from a distance for 4 long years, just waiting, making his plans, and now he is fixing to take them. He is going to take away everything you love, just like you took away everything he loved." That revelation just shattered the peace in that room. Emma started crying. Thomas looked completely lost. Little Lily had gone stock still, her eyes looking at something far off that nobody else could see. Then Lily made her move. She snatched up her slate and started drawing like she was possessed, her hands flying fast and desperate. When she was done, she held it up high. It was a barn burning to the ground, and a man was standing outside just watching, not lifting a finger to help. The man was holding a cane with a fancy handle. Lily pointed right at the drawing, and then she wrote underneath it, "He watched Mama die." Sarah took the slate, her hands shaking like a leaf. "Lily, honey, when did you see this?" Lily wrote again. "The night Mama died, I was outside. I saw him. What did he look like?" "Silver hair, Wolf Kane. Colton's voice was hardly a human sound. Silas Kane carries a cane with a wolf's head on it. I have seen it with my own two eyes. The awful truth started fitting together like pieces of a bad dream. Silas Kane was right there the night Hannah died. He had watched that barn burn, and he had done nothing. Or even worse, he had done something. He killed her. The words dropped from Colton's mouth heavy as stones. He killed his own daughter just because she chose me instead of him. Garrett's smug look confirmed it before he even spoke. She chose poorly. She should have stayed put where she belonged. What happened next was the kind of trouble that had been brewing for 4 hard years. Colton moved in a blur. His rifle came up. Sarah grabbed him just before he could pull the trigger. Doc and the others jumped Garrett's men. There was a mess of struggling and shouting, and the children started screaming. When the dust settled, Garrett and his boys were without their guns and tied up good and tight. No shots were fired and nobody was dead, but it was a mighty close thing. Colton stood over Garrett, his eyes burning with pure murder. He killed her. He killed my Hannah. We do not know that for a fact, Colton, Sarah said. Her voice was trembling, but it was steady. We have got to have proof. We need that ledger of his. We need to make him answer for every last thing. I want to put him in the ground, I know you do, but Colton, those children of yours need their father, not a man consumed by vengeance. We are going to do this the right way. We will get the evidence we need. We will put him behind bars for the rest of his days. That is how you get justice. Colton looked over at Emma, Thomas, and Lily, his children, Hannah's children, and Silas Kane's grandchildren. The whole tangled mess of it all was enough to tear a man in two. Emma was the first to speak. Mama chose you, Pa. She chose us. That has got to mean something. Do not let that man turn you into him. That wisdom coming from his 12-year-old daughter cut right through his blind rage. Colton lowered his rifle. He took a step back. Doc, get him tied up. Get him. Martha, send for the marshal. We are going to handle this by the book. While Vaughn's men were being secured, Sarah found Colton standing outside. He was standing there in the snow, shaking, and it was not from the cold. She walked right up to him and took his hand. You did not kill Hannah. He is the one who killed her, and it was because of me, because she picked me. No, he killed her because he is a monster who could not stand that his daughter was her own woman. You did not pull that trigger, Colton. He did. Do not you dare take his sin onto your shoulders. Emma thinks I am the one who killed her mother. Emma is just scared and all mixed up. But did you hear what she said? Your mother chose you. That is what came out of her mouth. She knows the truth deep down. She just needs a little time to come to terms with it. They just stood there together in the quiet darkness. The snow had started to fall again, all soft and gentle, covering up the ugly scars of the day in a blanket of clean white. We have got to finish this. Finish, Colton said. We have to get our hands on that ledger. Prove everything. Put Silas away for good. We will do it tomorrow together. Sarah, if something happens to me, if this all goes sideways, you have to promise me you will look after them. Emma and Thomas and Lily, you promise me they will not ever end up with Silas. Nothing is going to happen to you. Just promise me. She looked up at him. Here was the man who had pulled her from a freezing death, who had offered her a partnership instead of ownership, a man who was broken but still brave and trying with all his might to do right by everybody. I promise. But Colton, you are going to make it through this. We both are. And when it is all over, we are going to build something real good out of all this wreckage. He looked down at her. Snowflakes were caught in her hair, and her eyes were filled with pure grit. This woman, who had walked through her own private hell and decided to stand and fight instead of running away. Sarah Brennan, I do believe I am falling in love with you. The words just hung there in the air, feeling like a revelation, like something that had been building up since the first moment he found her in the snow and refused to look away from her pain. Well, that is some inconvenient timing. I know. We are right in the middle of a war with a man who has already killed once over love. I know. And we might just die tomorrow trying to rob him blind. I know. She moved in closer, stood on her toes, and kissed him. It was quick and fierce, a mix of a promise and a prayer. Then, let us make darn sure we survive, because Colton Rivers, I think I am falling in love with you too. They held on to each other in the fallen snow, while inside the ranch house, 3 children who had lost their mother watched and wondered if just maybe they were on the verge of getting a new kind of family again. Tomorrow, they would have to face Silas Kane. They would risk it all on one desperate play to show the world his crimes and end his terrible reign. They would either succeed or they would die trying. But for tonight, in that one quiet moment, they had each other. And sometimes, that was more than enough. The plans started coming together over the next 3 days, while the whole town of Silver Ridge held its breath and waited to see what Silas Kane would do next. In Martha's back room, surrounded by piles of ledgers and maps and a decade's worth of evidence, Colton and Sarah worked with the sharp focus of soldiers right before a big battle. Doc Hensley would come and go, bringing them news from town. Martha kept them fed and stood guard at the door. And slowly, piece by painstaking piece, a real strategy began to take shape out of all the chaos. Sarah was going to go to Kane's big house all by herself. She would show up and present herself as a woman who had been betrayed by Colton Rivers, looking for protection from the very man she had run all the way to Montana to marry. It was a long shot, for sure. Kane was no fool. But Sarah had one thing going for her that Colton did not. She was a complete stranger. Nobody he knew. And in the bruises still plain on her skin, she carried a kind of truth you just could not fake. The hard part would be getting her out of there before Kane figured out she was not who she was pretending to be. On the morning of the 4th day, as the sun came up all pale and cold over the mountains, Sarah got ready to leave. She put on the same clothes she had been wearing when Colton found her, now all cleaned and patched up by Martha's careful hands. The bruises on her face had faded from a dark purple to a sickly yellow, but they were still there, clear enough to tell their own story. She looked exactly like what she was supposed to be, a woman running from one dangerous man and desperate enough to put her trust in another. Colton watched her get ready with a familiar knot tightening in his chest, something he had not felt in 4 long years. Not since the day Hannah had ridden out to help a neighbor with a difficult birth and did not come home till way after dark, and he had spent all those hours in a pure agony of what-ifs that had nothing to do with common sense and everything to do with love. He pushed that feeling down deep. There was no place for it right now, not when everything hinged on a clear head and an even steadier nerve. Remember, he said, for the 3rd time that morning you are looking for his study. The safe is going to be behind a painting or a bookshelf. Kane is predictable like that. Men like him always hide their dirty secrets right out in the open. Certain their own cleverness makes them invisible to everybody else. I remember. Find the study, find the safe, get the ledger, and get out, and if something goes wrong, I will figure it out. Colton, we have been over this and over this. I know the risks. Knowing and living through it are 2 different things. Sarah turned to look him square in the eye. In the pale light of the morning, her eyes were very green and crystal clear. I survived 6 whole weeks with Garrett Vaughn. I survived a blizzard that by all rights should have killed me. I can surely survive one afternoon in Silas Kane's house. Hannah could not. The words just fell between them, heavy as stones dropped in a quiet pond. Colton had not meant to say them, had not meant to give a voice to the fear that had been chewing at him since the moment they cooked up this plan. But there they were honest and awful. Sarah met his gaze and did not flinch. I am not Hannah, and this is not 4 years ago. This is right now. This is about us. And we have something your wife did not have. What is that? We have each other. She had to face Kane all by herself if she ever got the chance. I will not be alone. You will be out there watching. You will come if I need you. That changes everything. And she was right. Colton knew she was right, but that knowledge did not do a thing to lift the heavy weight in his soul as he watched her get into the wagon Doc Hensley had gotten ready. It was a plain, hired wagon, The kind that would not draw any attention. The kind of wagon any woman in trouble might have taken to find the one man in all of Montana who might protect her from a man she was running from. The wagon started to pull away. Sarah never once looked back. Colton just stood there in the cold morning light, feeling the distance growing between them like a rope pulling tight. Then he turned to his own horse, already saddled and waiting. He would give her a 2-hour head start. Then he would ride after her. Him and Doc and 3 other men from town who had their own scores to settle with Silas Kane. They would not ride right up to the front gate, but they would be close. Close enough to see what was happening. Close enough to do something about it. Close enough, he prayed, to stop the worst from coming to pass. The Kane estate was a monument to ill-gotten gains, sitting about 20 miles north of Silver Ridge. It was 3 whole stories of fancy stone and glass, with perfect lawns that someone was fighting a losing battle to keep clear of the winter frost. He had horses in stables that were bigger than the homes most ranchers lived in. His servants wore uniforms that cost more than a working man made in 6 months. Sarah's wagon eased on up the long gravel drive, stopping before a set of doors that looked like they belonged on the governor's own mansion. She climbed down from the seat, making sure her movements looked clumsy and scared. A woman at the end of her rope with nowhere left to turn. The big door swung open before she even got to it. A man with silver hair and a face carved from granite looked her over, the way a rancher sizes up livestock for auction. Deliveries go round back. I am not a delivery. I have to speak with Mr. Kane. Please, it is important. Mr. Kane is not seeing any unscheduled visitors. My name is Sarah Brennan. I came from St. Louis. I reckon he will want to see me. Something changed in that man's eyes. He knew that name. He'd been told to watch for a woman who fit her description. Wait right here. The door shut. Sarah stood out there in the biting wind and counted the beats of her own heart. 73 of them passed before the door opened up again. This time it was Silas Kane himself standing there. He was not at all what Sarah had pictured. In her head, she had made him out to be a monster. But the man in front of her looked like somebody's kindly old grandfather. He had silver hair slicked back from a face that was lined with age, but not with meanness. He wore an expensive suit like it was nothing special. His eyes were sharp, you could tell he was always calculating, but they were not cruel. He gave her a smile. It was a kind smile, the practiced kind from a man who learned a long time ago that a little kindness could hide a whole lot of control. Miss Brennan, what a surprise. Garrett told me you decided to stay with Colton Rivers, but here you are. Please come on inside. You look about half frozen. Sarah let him guide her into an entryway filled with cool marble and warm firelight. A fire roared in a hearth big enough to roast a whole hog in. The walls were covered in paintings, all of them expensive, and chosen to show off his wealth without being too loud about it. Everything in that place just whispered about the kind of old money that does not need to shout. A woman appeared at the top of the sweeping staircase, Cordelia Kane. She came down with the careful elegance of a woman who learned to be a pretty thing to look at. Her dress was the newest style from New York, or maybe even Paris. Her face was beautiful, like a flower pressed in a book long after it should have wilted. Another stray, Silas. You sure do collect them. Miss Brennan is hardly a stray, my love. She is an old friend's intended who seems to have had a change of heart. Miss Brennan, this is my wife, Cordelia. Cordelia's eyes scanned Sarah up and down like a woman who'd spent her whole life judging other women and always found them lacking. She is so young and looks so broken. What happened to your face, child? Colton Rivers. The lies slid out of Sarah's mouth, easy as you please, because it was mostly true. Colton had not laid a hand on her, but he stood for everything she was supposed to be afraid of. A stranger, a man with power, a man who could ruin her with just a word or a closed fist. The fear in her voice was real. She just aimed it at a different man. He sounded like a good man in his letters, but when I got there, when I saw the way he lived and how much anger he had inside him, I knew I had made a terrible mistake. I tried to leave him. He would not let me go. He told me I belonged to him now, that he had paid for me to come here and that I owed him. It was a perfect story, mostly because Sarah did not have to act much. She just told the truth of what Garrett Vaughn did and let Silas Kane think she was talking about Colton Rivers. A shadow crossed Silas's face. It was not surprise. It looked a whole lot like satisfaction. That sounds just like Joseph Rivers's boy. The father was a mean brute and an outlaw. I reckon the son is cut from the same cloth. My dear Miss Brennan, you did the right thing to run away. Please, have a seat. We will have some tea and then we will figure out what to do about this Colton Rivers problem. Sarah let him lead her to a sitting room with delicate furniture covered in rich fabrics. She sat on the very edge of a chair with her hands folded in her lap, playing the part of a woman who was just barely holding on. Cordelia poured tea from a set that probably cost more than Sarah's father ever made in a single year. "How did you get away?" Silas asked. His voice was gentle with concern, but Sarah could hear the cold calculation working underneath it all. He was testing her story, looking for any holes. "I waited until he rode into town. Then I took a horse, and I rode like the devil was chasing me. I have been hiding for 2 days, trying to figure out what to do. I remembered Garrett Vaughn mentioning your name. He said you were a powerful man, someone who could stand up to Colton Rivers. I am so sorry to bother you. I just do not have anywhere else to go. You are not a bother at all. You are a victim of a violent man. And Miss Brennan, I want you to know that you are safe here now. Colton Rivers will not lay another hand on you." The words sounded just right. The tone was perfect. But Sarah felt a chill, colder than a blue norther, creep right down her spine. This was a man who knew how to twist things, who could offer you safety with one hand while he was holding a knife behind his back. She thought about Garrett Vaughn and his smiling threats, and her Uncle Lawrence and his cruel brand of caring. Silas Kane was both of them, but refined and perfected. "Thank you," she whispered. "I do not know how I can ever repay you for your kindness." "There is nothing to repay, though I admit I am curious about something. Garrett told me you have a knack for numbers, for accounting. Is that true?" Sarah's breath hitched in her throat. This was it, the chance she was looking for, the way into the one place she needed to be. But she could not look too eager. "I kept the books for my father's tailor shop, and later for my uncle. Why do you ask?" "I find myself in need of someone with just those skills. My current accountant is getting on in years and his eyesight is failing him. If you're looking for a job, a way to earn your keep while we sort out this mess with Rivers, I would be glad to offer you the position." It was too easy. Way too easy. But Sarah knew she could not say no without making him suspicious. "I would be so grateful. Truly. I hate feeling like I am useless." "Then it is all settled. Cordelia, please have Mrs. Henderson get the blue guest room ready for Miss Brennan, and find some suitable clothes for her. Miss Brennan, you will join us for dinner tonight. Tomorrow, I will show you to my study, and you can get started on my accounts." Sarah smiled and thanked him, playing the part of a grateful girl who'd been rescued. But all the while her mind was racing. Silas Kane either knew something or he suspected, or he was just playing some other game she could not see. No matter what, she had one night. She had one chance to find what she came for before this whole fragile story came crashing down. Dinner was like some kind of polite nightmare. Silas and Cordelia sat at opposite ends of a dining table long enough for 12 men, with Sarah stuck right in the middle like a prize or a prisoner. The food was the best she had ever tasted. The wine was older than she was. The conversation was as pleasant as could be, and it was laced with poison. Silas talked about Silver Ridge like he owned the whole place, like all the folks who lived and worked and died there were just game pieces on his personal board. He brought up the Miller family who'd lost their barn in a fire, the Avery family who'd sold off their land for next to nothing, the Morrison family, whose father now worked for wages on the same land he used to own. He spoke of it all with a sad shake of his head, full of regret for the tough life on the frontier, acting like he had nothing to do with any of it, like his own hands were clean. Cordelia drank her wine right through dinner and did not say much, but when she did speak, her words were heavy, coming from someone who had given up pretending a long time ago. "My husband collects people, the way other men collect butterflies. He finds them when they are broken and brings them here and makes sure they are grateful. It is his special talent, his, making folks thankful to the very man who ruined them. Cordelia, you are spooking our guest. Am I? Maybe she ought to be spooked. Maybe we all ought to be. The rest of that supper was swallowed down in a thick, heavy silence. Once it was over, a housekeeper led Sarah to her room. The woman moved like a wind-up toy with a programmed stillness that showed she had long ago learned not to see, not to hear, and certainly not to ask questions. The blue guest room was bigger than the whole house Sarah had grown up in. You could have fit 4 people in that bed. The window stared out into grounds that just melted into the blackness, and the door, Sarah noticed, had no lock on the inside. She waited until the great house settled, until the shuffling of servants heading to bed, and the last lamp being snuffed out, disappeared into the deep, cold quiet of a winter night. Then she got up, still in her clothes, and slipped out into the hallway. The house was a tangled mess of corridors and closed doors, but Sarah had spent the afternoon trying to burn the layout into her memory from what little she could see. Silas's study had to be on the first floor, likely tucked away at the back, far from prying eyes, a place where business could be done in secret. She found it after 20 minutes of moving like a shadow. The door was locked, but the lock was old and not too complicated. Sarah used a hairpin, a good bit of patience, and some skills she picked up watching her uncle's less than honorable friends. The lock gave a soft click. The door swung open on hinges that were slick with oil. Moonlight poured through the tall windows, lighting up a room of dark wood, worn leather, and the faint smell of old pipe tobacco. A desk big as a wagon took up one wall. Bookshelves covered 2 others, and on the 4th wall, hidden behind a painting of a young woman with gentle eyes and Silas Kane's own nose, Sarah found what she had been searching for. The painting moved away on secret hinges and showed a safe. It was not a newfangled safe with a spinning dial, but an older kind that needed a key. Sarah looked it over in the pale light and felt her hope just drop to the floor. She did not have a key, and she had no way to get it open without making a racket that would wake the whole house. She was just about to give up when she saw something, a little drawer in the desk, hidden behind a piece of false wood. She pulled it open, and there was a key on a silver chain. And under that key was a note, written in Silas Kane's neat, careful handwriting. Vault combination. Hannah's birthday. Sarah just froze solid. Hannah, that was Colton's wife, the woman who had died 4 years ago in that terrible barn fire. Why in the world would Silas Kane have her birthday as the combination to his safe? How would he even know it? There was no time to figure it out. Sarah used the key. The safe opened with a quiet click that sounded like a gunshot in the silent house. Inside were stacks of papers, legal documents, bank statements, and way in the back, a leather book with gold trim on the pages. Sarah pulled it out and turned to the first page. There were column after column of dealings, all written down in Silas's perfect script. Dates, names, amounts, and right next to each one, a short note on how it was done. Bribery, threats, faked papers, all of it laid out with the sharp precision of a man who was sure his dirty laundry would never be aired out in public. This was it. This was the proof that Colton needed so badly. Sarah tucked the ledger inside the front of her dress and was just reaching to shut the safe when something else caught her eye. There was a second compartment in the back, deeper and hidden away. She reached inside and her fingers touched something she did not expect at all. A photograph. She pulled it out and held it up to the moonlight. It was a man, old and thin with a wild gray beard. His eyes, which had once been sharp, were now cloudy from being locked away, or from sickness, or maybe both. But his face had a familiar shape, the line of his jaw, the bridge of his nose. Sarah's hands started to tremble. She had seen this face before. She saw it in Colton's features, in Thomas's little smile, in Emma's stubborn chin. This was Joseph Rivers, Colton's father. And he was alive. Before Sarah could wrap her head around it, before she could even begin to understand what it all meant, she heard footsteps in the hall. Lamplight spilled in from the hallway. His face was calm. He even looked a little amused. "I knew you would come here. Silas said you would not. He said you were just some scared woman looking for a safe place to hide. But I know you better than that, do I not, Sarah?" Sarah backed away toward the window. Her mind was racing, trying to find a way out. The door was blocked. The window was 3 stories high. There was no escape that did not involve getting past Garrett. "The ledger," Garrett said. "You have it. I can see its outline right there under your dress. Hand it over. And maybe Silas will be merciful. Maybe he will just toss you out into the cold winter night instead of doing what he did to the last woman who tried to cross him." "What did he do to the last woman?" Garrett smiled. It was the very same smile he had on the train when he offered Sarah that tainted coffee. It was the smile of a man who purely enjoys the suffering of others. He burned her alive, locked her in a barn, and set the whole thing on fire, made it look like a terrible accident. The whole town cried for poor Hannah Rivers, never knowing her own father was the one who murdered her. Those words hit Sarah like a fist to the gut. Hannah, Silas's daughter, he had killed his own child. "You are lying." "Am I?" "Go on and ask Silas. Or even better, ask that little girl who does not speak." Lily, she was there. She saw the whole thing. She saw her own grandfather watch her mother burn and not lift a single finger to save her. Before Sarah could answer, before this new horror could even settle in, more footsteps echoed in the hall. Silas Kane appeared right behind Garrett. He looked at Sarah with a face that was no longer kind, no longer careful, just cold and calculating and looking mighty tired. "I had truly hoped you were what you seemed to be, a real victim, someone I could actually help. But no, you are working with him, with my daughter's murderer, with the man who took Hannah away from me and got her killed because he was careless and poor." "You killed her," Sarah said. The words came out stronger than she felt. "Garrett just told me you locked her in that barn and burned it down." Garrett does have a taste for the dramatic. The truth is much simpler and much sadder. Hannah chose Colton Rivers over me, over wealth and safety, and every single thing I could have given her. She chose back-breaking work and being poor and a man who was too proud to take any help. I tried to talk her into leaving him. She would not listen. So yes, I made some arrangements. I figured if the barn burned, if Colton lost everything, Hannah would finally see the light. She would come home, bring my grandchildren back where they belonged. His voice cracked a little on that last word. I never wanted her to die. She was not supposed to be in that barn. She was supposed to be in the house with the children. But she saw the smoke. She ran to save some livestock that were not worth one of her fingernails, and the roof came down before I could stop it. Before I could get to her, you just let her die. I made one mistake, a single mistake, and I have paid the price for it every day since then. But Colton Rivers, he made 100 mistakes. He brought her to this frozen wasteland. He made her work like a common field hand. He got her with child 3 times, which drained all her strength. He built that barn with cheap lumber. He created the very situation that killed her. And for that, he is going to pay. He will lose everything, just like I lost everything. His land, his children, his hope, all of it. Silas stepped forward. Garrett moved to block the door even more. "The ledger, Miss Brennan, you will give it to me, or Garrett will take it from you, and then we will have a talk about what to do with a woman who breaks into my house and steals my property." Sarah's hand went to the ledger hidden against her side. Her mind was spinning, looking for a way out and finding none that ended well. The window was still 3 stories up. The door was still blocked, and she was just one woman against 2 men who had already proven they were more than willing to kill. Then the window exploded, blowing inward in a spray of glass and freezing winter air. Colton Rivers came through it like a flash flood made of pure muscle and fury. He hit the floor, rolled, and came up with his pistol already drawn and pointed right at Silas Kane's heart. "Step away from her." Behind him, through the busted window, Sarah could see a rope tied to something up above. She could see Doc Hensley's face in the window frame, with a rifle in his hands covering the whole room. Silas did not step away. He did not even blink. "You are too late, Rivers. She is a thief. I have got witnesses. Garrett saw her break into my safe. You can shoot me, but my death will not save her, or you, or those children. Those children are your grandchildren, Hannah's babies, and you have spent 4 years trying to take them from the only parent they have left." "What kind of a man does that make you? A man who knows you killed my daughter. I did not kill Hannah. You did. You were the one who set that fire. We both know it. Prove it." The word just hung there in the air like a dare, and Sarah knew this was the moment everything had led to. Not the ledger, not the proof of his cheating. This, the truth about how Hannah died. The deep wound that had poisoned everything between these two men. "Lily saw you," Sarah said. Both men turned to stare at her. The youngest girl, she was in the barn that day. She saw you watching. She drew a picture of it. A man with silver hair and a cane with a wolf's head on it. "That is you, is it not? That is your cane." In the corner of his study, Silas's face became a still, pale mask. "That child does not speak a word. She cannot testify. She can write and she can draw, and she will do it right in front of a judge, in front of a jury. Your own granddaughter is going to put you away for murdering her mother." Something inside Silas Kane just broke. The mask of the civilized, controlled man shattered into a million pieces. What was left was older and much more terrible. A sadness so deep it had soured into pure hate. I loved Hannah more than my own life. When her mother passed, Hannah was all I had left. I built this whole empire for her. Everything I ever did, I did it so she would never want for anything. And she threw it all away for him. For a dirt-poor rancher with more pride than sense. She broke my heart. So yes, I was the one who set the fire. I thought it would make her come home. I was wrong. And I have had to live with that awful mistake for 4 long years. But I will not let her death be for nothing. I will not let the man who took her away from me keep the children she died trying to save. They are not yours to take. They are not yours to keep. And neither is my father. The words flew out of Colton's mouth before he could stop them, before he could even think. They just burst out of him, raw and desperate. Silas's eyes went wide. Just for a second. But it was enough. "What did you just say?" "My father, Joseph Rivers. I saw the photograph in your safe. He is alive, is he not? You did not just ruin him and have him sent to prison. You have kept him all these years. Where is he, Kane? Where are you keeping my father?" Silas did not say a word, but something flickered across his face. Maybe it was guilt, or maybe it was the satisfaction of a man. Another piece of ammunition. Sarah's voice was low. There was a hidden space in the safe, tucked behind the ledger book. That is where the photograph was. It showed an old, sick man, locked away. Colton's gun hand began to shake. "Where is he?" "Colton." Doc Hensley's voice cut in from the window, a clear warning. "Easy now. Do not do something you will regret forever." But Colton was not paying attention. He took one step closer to Silas. Then he took another. The barrel of the gun stayed pointed right at him. "You kept him alive all this time. While I believed he was dead and gone, while I mourned for him, you had him. Why?" Silas let out a smile. It was a wicked kind of smile, filled with nothing but pure spite. "Because if he were dead, he would be a martyr, a victim. But alive, broken, and driven crazy from being alone, he is just a warning story. A reminder that getting in the way of Silas Kane brings consequences that stretch on for decades. There is a cellar underneath the east wing. It has a lock, and I am the only one with the key. He has been down there for 12 years. Rivers, 12 years in the dark. Do you have any idea what 12 years of total darkness can do to a man's mind?" Colton's finger grew tight on the trigger. Sarah noticed it. She saw the exact moment he decided that some wrongs were beyond the reach of the law and needed a much older form of justice. "Colton, do not." Sarah's voice sliced through the blinding fog of his anger. If you kill him, you will never be able to forgive yourself, and your father will never step into the sunlight again. We have to have him alive. We need him to tell us where Joseph is." That was the only thing that could have possibly broken through to him. Colton's hand became steady and lowered. Not by much, but it was enough. "Take me to him right now." "Or what? You are going to shoot me?" "Then you will never locate the cellar. It is very well concealed. You could look for it for years. Then I will burn this entire house down, one room at a time, until I find him." Silas looked hard at Colton's face and realized he was not bluffing. "All right, then. But I want you to understand something, Rivers. When you see what I have turned your father into, when you see what 12 years has done to him, you will finally get why I kept him alive. Death would have been a kindness. I wanted him to suffer." The cellar was every bit as awful as Silas's description had suggested. It had stone walls, an iron door, and no light at all except for what trickled down from upstairs when the door was open. And over in the corner, on a heap of rags that might have been a bed once, was a figure that hardly looked like a person. Joseph Rivers was, in fact, alive. His heart was beating and his lungs were taking in air. But the man Colton remembered as his father, the one who was strong and full of principle, brave enough to defy Silas Kane 3 decades earlier, was gone. All that was left was an empty shell. His eyes did not focus. His skin was pulled tight over his bones, and his gray hair and beard were long and tangled. Colton fell to his knees next to the old man and took his hand. It felt cold and frail, and it did not squeeze back. "Papa, it is me. It is Colton. I am here now. I am going to get you out of here." There was no reaction. Just quiet, shallow breaths and those empty eyes. Doc Hensley made his way down the stairs, took a single look, and his expression hardened like granite. "This is pure torture. This is a crime against all decency." Silas stood up in the doorway, just watching them. His face was completely blank. "Your father double-crossed me. This is the price people pay when they cross me." Sarah came down the steps with care. She knelt down next to Colton and the shattered man who was his father. She took Joseph's other hand in hers and spoke with the gentle authority of someone who had experience caring for the sick. "Mr. Rivers, Joseph, are you able to hear me? Just squeeze my hand if you can hear what I'm saying." There was nothing. Then, after what felt like a very long time, there was the slightest pressure. It was so faint she thought she might have imagined it, but it was definitely there. "Good. That is very good. You are going to be okay now. We are taking you home, back to the light, to warmth, and to your son. Just hold on a little bit longer." Colton lifted his father into his arms. The old man felt like he weighed almost nothing. Colton carried him up the staircase as if he were made of delicate glass. Doc Hensley was right behind them. Sarah was the last one, still holding the ledger close to her side. At the very top of the stairs, Silas Kane was standing there waiting. And behind him stood Sheriff Morton with 6 of his deputies. "Silas Kane," the sheriff said. His voice sounded weary. It was the voice of a man who knew he had been bought and was finally, maybe, ready to make things right. "You are under arrest for the murder of Hannah Rivers, for fraud, for bribery, for kidnapping and unlawful imprisonment, and for about 40 other offenses that I will probably be fired for ignoring for all these years. On what proof?" Sarah pulled the ledger out from her dress and held it up. "This? Every single crime you have committed in 20 years, written in your own hand with dates and names, and the amounts you paid to every official you bought, including Sheriff Morton here on many occasions." Morton's jaw clenched, but he gave a nod. "I am turning evidence. I am testifying against you, Silas. It might lighten my sentence, or it might not. But I am finished pretending that I do not know the kind of man you are." Silas Kane's shoulders slumped. In the dim light of the lamp, he suddenly looked all of his 60 years. He looked like a man who had built a kingdom on sand, only to watch the tide wash it all away. "I want a lawyer. You will get one as soon as we have you in a cell. And Silas, that cellar where you held Joseph Rivers, you are going to live in one just like it for the rest of your days. Federal prison, alone in a cell. It seems only fair. They started to lead him out. As he walked past Colton, who was still cradling his unconscious father, Silas paused. She truly loved you. I never could figure it out. You had nothing to give her. But she loved you all the same. If I could go back to that day, if I could save her, I would give up everything I have, everything that I am. But I cannot. So this is all that is left. All that is. This bitterness, this need to make you ache the way I ache. I am sorry it came to this, but I'm not sorry that I tried. Colton remained silent. There was nothing left to say. Silas was led out into the cold Montana night. Garrett Vaughn was taken with him, that same empty smile on his face. Cordelia Kane watched it all from the staircase. After the last lawman was gone, she walked down and poured herself a glass of whiskey from a fancy crystal bottle. Well, I suppose that is settled. 20 years married to a man who loved his dead daughter more than his living wife. I ought to feel something. Maybe relief, maybe sadness, but all I feel is tired. She downed the whiskey in a single gulp. There is a spare room on the first floor. Put Joseph in there. I will send for a doctor from Helena, a proper one, not some man involved in my husband's dirty business. The old man has earned that much. Why are you helping us? Sarah asked. Cordelia's smile was full of bitterness. Because I lived like a prisoner in this house for 2 decades. Maybe helping another prisoner go free will help make up for some of it. They settled Joseph into a room that was warm, clean, and filled with sunlight. Doc Hensley looked him over while Colton stood nearby, his hands clenched into fists, his jaw tight with feelings he did not have a name for. He is underfed and needs water. His muscles are weak from not being used, but his heart is strong. His lungs are clear. With some time and good care, he might get better. Physically, that is. Mentally, Doc's voice faded. 12 years all by himself. A man does not just bounce back from something like that. Will he recognize me? I do not know, son. I truly just do not know. They remained at the Kane Ranch for 3 days as Joseph slowly returned to the world. It happened in small steps. First, he could tell the difference between light and dark. Then he became aware of other people being in the room. Then, on the 3rd day, a single word, raspy but clear. Colton. Colton was by his father's side in a heartbeat. Pa, I am here. You are safe now. Joseph's eyes focused for the first time in years. They truly focused on his son's face. You are old. When did you get so old? Colton let out a laugh that was half a sob. While you were gone, Pa. I am 38 now. I have 3 kids of my own. Emma, Thomas, and Lily. They're going to want to meet you. 3 children. Joseph's voice was filled with wonder, and it sounded fragile. I have grandchildren. You sure do. And you have a daughter-in-law if she will accept me. Her name is Sarah. She is the one who found you. The one who was certain we had to bring you home. Joseph's gaze shifted to where Sarah was standing in the doorway. She walked over slowly and sat in the chair next to the bed. Mr. Rivers, it is an honor to finally meet you. Your son has told me so many stories about you. My son. Joseph's hand twitched, reaching out. Colton took it, holding it tightly between both of his own. I was sure I would die down there in the dark. I thought I would never see the light again. Or you, or... His voice cracked. Tears streamed down his thin cheeks. Colton leaned down, pressing his forehead against his father's hand, and he wept right along with him. All the sadness from 10 years of believing his father was gone. All the anger at Silas Kane for the cruelty of keeping a good man locked away in darkness. It all came pouring out in that quiet room, while Sarah stood guard, giving them the space they needed to grieve and to begin to heal. The trip back to Silver Ridge took 5 days. They took their time because Joseph was still weak, and besides, there was no need to hurry anymore. When they arrived, Emma had a room all ready for him. Thomas had gathered a bouquet of early spring flowers. Lily had drawn a picture of a man with a kind face, based on the stories Colton had told her. When Joseph saw them, when he saw these three children who were his own flesh and blood, his legacy, he cried again. But this time, they were not tears of sorrow. They were tears of joy. "You are beautiful," he told them. "Every single one of you. Just so beautiful." Emma, who had been so full of anger for so long, who had put up walls around her heart to keep from being hurt again, finally let go. She ran to this grandfather she had never met and wrapped her arms around his neck. He was not strong enough to hug her back tightly, but he held on to her the best he could, and that was more than enough. That evening, after Joseph was tucked into bed and the children had finally been coaxed to stop asking questions and go to sleep, Colton found Emma out in the barn. She was sitting up in the hayloft, the spot she always went to when she needed to think. "Can I come up?" Emma just nodded. Colton climbed the ladder and sat down beside his daughter. They watched the stars through the big open loft door. "I found something today," Emma said, "in the attic when I was getting blankets for Grandfather." She handed him a small leather-bound book. "It is Ma's diary. She wrote in it during the last year of her life." Colton felt his breath catch in his throat. "Emma, that is private." "I know, but I read it anyway. I had to understand why she stayed with you, why she picked this life, why she—" Emma's voice trembled. "Why she ran into that fire. What did it say?" Emma opened the journal to a page marked with a thin ribbon. She read the words out loud, her voice shaking. "March 14th, 1882. Silas came by again today. He offered me $10,000 to leave Colton and bring the children to live at his ranch. I told him no. He does not get it. He never will. This is not about money or being comfortable or safe. It is about love. Colton Rivers is the most stubborn, prideful, and difficult man I have ever known, but he is also the kindest and the most honest. He looks at me like I am something precious, like I matter for more than what I can do for him. My father never looked at me that way. He loves the idea of me, what I can mean for his family name. Colton loves me for who I am. That is worth more than all of Silas's gold." Emma's tears dripped onto the old, faded pages. "She chose you, Pa. Not because she had to, but because she wanted to. And when she ran into that fire, she was not choosing Lucy over me. She was choosing all of us. She was being the kind of mother she always wanted to be. Brave, selfless, willing to risk it all to protect her children." Colton pulled his daughter into a hug. "I am sorry, Emma. I am so sorry I was not able to save her. You tried. That is what counts. And Pa, I forgive you for not being perfect, for making mistakes, for just being human." They sat there together in the hayloft as the night grew deeper around them. Down below, Sarah looked up and saw the two of them, a father and daughter healing their wounds together. She smiled and went back inside to check on Joseph. The trial lasted for 3 months. The prosecutor for the territory put together a case that was solid as a rock. Silas Kane's lawyers were good, but they could not argue with the proof in his own handwriting. They could not brush aside Lily Rivers's testimony, which she gave in writing with painful honesty. They had no explanation for Joseph Rivers, who was the living, breathing proof of kidnapping and torture. The jury took only 2 hours to decide. Silas Kane was found guilty on 37 charges. He was given a life sentence in a federal prison. As they took him away, he looked over at Colton one last time, not with anger, but with simple exhaustion. "Tell them I am sorry. Tell my grandchildren that their grandfather loved them, even if he had a terrible way of showing it." Colton gave a single nod. It was not forgiveness, but it was an acknowledgement. And sometimes, that is the only grace a person has left to offer. Spring arrived in Silver Ridge just like it always did, coming in slow and careful, almost like it was afraid winter might come back and punish it for being too bold. But it came anyway. The ice melted, the grass turned green, the flowers started to bloom, and in all that warmth and light, broken things started to mend. Joseph Rivers got better little by little. He would never be the same man he was before those 12 years in the dark. But he learned how to smile again, how to laugh, how to hold his grandchildren and tell them stories about what their father was like as a boy. He moved into the small cabin at the edge of Colton's land, near enough for a daily visit, but far enough to have his own space. Emma found a sense of peace in her mother's diary. She read it often, getting to know the Hannah that existed beyond just her mother. She learned that love is a choice, not a duty, and that being brave does not mean you are not afraid. It means you act even when you are. Thomas's collection of injured critters grew. Sarah helped him build a real shelter for them. Doc Hensley taught him some basic animal medicine. The boy, who had been so scared of losing things, learned to fight for life instead of just grieving for death. And Lily began to talk more and more each day. Her voice was quiet and shaky at first, but it got stronger. One morning, while she and Sarah were hanging laundry, she said, "I think Mama would like you. You make Pa smile just like she used to be." That spring, on a beautiful warm morning when the meadows were covered in wildflowers and the mountains were perfectly clear against a sky of unbelievable blue, Colton asked Sarah to be his wife. He did not use fancy words or grand gestures, just simple, honest feeling. "Sarah Brennan, I am not a man who is good with words. I cannot offer you riches or an easy life without any trouble. This land is tough, and ranching is even tougher work. But I can offer you honesty. I can offer you a true partnership. I can promise that I will love you and choose you, and be by your side for as long as we are both breathing. Will you marry me?" Sarah looked at this man who had rescued her, and then gave her a purpose for living. A man who had shared his deepest hurts and his most valuable treasures with her. A man who showed her that love was not about control, but about freedom. Yes, 1,000 times, yes. They got married 3 weeks after that in a simple and perfect ceremony. Martha wept all the way through it. Doc Hensley walked Sarah down the aisle since her own father was long gone and her uncle was locked up in jail back in St. Louis. Emma served as her maid of honor in a dress that Sarah had helped her make. Thomas was in charge of the rings and did not drop them. And Lily went around scattering flower petals with a smile on her face the entire time. Joseph stood right next to his son, looking thin but strong, and he placed Colton's hand into Sarah's with a blessing. "May you both have the strength to choose each other every single day, even when it is difficult, especially when it is difficult." As Colton kissed his new wife, when he pulled her in and held her like she was the most precious thing on earth, Emma leaned toward Lily and said in a whisper, "Mom would have really liked her. She would have wanted Pa to be happy again." Lily nodded in agreement. Then she said, loud enough for anyone close by to hear, "I think Mom sent her to us through the winter to save us all." And maybe she had. A year went by and then another one. The ranch did well. With Sarah's knack for handling the finances and Colton's understanding of the land, they grew the ranch, hired more help, bought more cattle, and built a new barn. This one was sturdy and safe, right on the spot where the old one had burned down. In the second spring after they were married, Sarah had a baby girl. They named her Hannah, after the woman whose love had started this whole chain of events. The baby had her father's dark hair and her mother's green eyes, and a cry that could rouse the whole house. Emma, who was now 14, turned out to be a natural with babies. Thomas, at 11, was more interested in the new batch of kittens in the barn than his new sister. And Lily, who was 9, would sit by Sarah's rocking chair for hours, singing lullabies in a voice that was getting stronger with each passing day. Joseph held his newest granddaughter and cried, "I thought I was going to die in that darkness, but look at me now, holding hope, holding light, holding the future." On a winter evening, 2 years after Sarah had first shown up in Silver Ridge, barely alive, the family was all together around the fireplace. Outside, a fresh layer of snow covered everything in white. Inside, the warmth and light and love formed a circle that kept them all safe. Colton was in his chair with baby Hannah sleeping on his shoulder. Sarah sat next to him mending some clothes. Emma was reading a book out loud. Thomas and Lily were playing a game of chess on the floor, having a friendly argument about whether knights were allowed to move backward. Joseph was dozing in the corner, making a comment every now and then that showed he was listening, even though his eyes were closed. It was a normal, ordinary evening, the kind that was happening in homes all over the Montana Territory every winter night. But for the people in that room, it meant the world. It was what they had all fought for, what they had taken risks for. It was the choice they had made, when it would have been so much easier to just walk away. Sarah glanced up from her sewing, met Colton's gaze, and smiled at him over their daughter's head. He smiled right back. No words were necessary. They had already said everything important in the promises they made to each other and in the life they had decided to build. Outside, winter had painted the landscape in shades of white and gray, but inside the fire burned bright and warm, and the family that had been pieced together from broken parts sat there, safe and complete and loved. The woman who had come to them broken and frozen had finally found her way home. Not to a place, but to people, to a purpose, and to a love that did not ask for anything, but gave everything. And the man who had saved her had been saved right back. Winter changed into spring, and spring changed into summer. The seasons passed by just like they always did, not caring about human happiness or sadness. But in the small ranch house in Silver Ridge, Montana, joy had found a place to grow. And it grew stubborn and strong, even in the toughest of circumstances. This was not the ending that any of them had imagined, but it was far better than anything they had ever allowed themselves to wish for. This content was carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to deliver meaningful stories with valuable life lessons. Every narrative is crafted to entertain, inspire, and empower our audience. We believe that great stories can change lives, and we are committed to bringing you content that matters. Thank you for being part of our community.